Support for Audacious with Chion Wolf provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. When you hear the word phobia, you probably think of things like spiders, snakes, heights, maybe flying or public speaking. But what if the thing that made your face flush, your hands clammy, or heart race was an everyday object, completely benign to other people? What if you couldn't walk across a lawn without feeling absolutely consumed with fear and disgust? What if you could barely look at yourself in the mirror, afraid your reflection might move when you didn't? And what if you couldn't even say the word button without a wave of discomfort washing over you? And so you wear t-shirts and hoodies your whole life. Today, you're going to meet 3 people who live with these very real aversions to grass, reflections, and shirt buttons. To help us understand what makes common everyday objects so terrifying to some people and what can be done about it, we welcome back to the show Dr. David Tolin. He's the director of the Anxiety Disorder Center at the Institute of Living here in Hartford, and an expert on how and why phobias take root. You might remember him from our conversation a few years ago about hoarding disorder. So how do these phobias happen, and how uncommon are the ones we're talking about?
These are pretty uncommon phobias. It's not impossible, as you can see. I mean, theoretically, anything can be the target of a phobia. And sometimes that's because the thing actually has some danger value, but a lot of the time it really doesn't. There's a reason, for example, that we fear things like spiders and snakes more than we fear things like guns and cars, even though the latter are much more dangerous than the former. This is a theory called evolutionary preparedness. And the idea is that we are predisposed to learn to fear things that posed some threat value to our ancestors in caves, rather than those things that pose threats to us now. So it was really during the time that our brains were evolving that we learned what's scary and what's not scary. So you very rarely see people with fears of things, even dangerous things, that weren't around in those times.
When you consider out of the ordinary phobias like this that don't fall into the more understandable category of, evolutionarily speaking, this is appropriate, what makes somebody click into these phobias?
You know, it's often easy for us to speculate, and a lot of people have, that if you have a phobia of something, it must mean that you've had a bad experience with something like that in your history. And certainly sometimes that is the case, but much of the time it's not. I mean, a lot of us don't feel comfortable swimming in the ocean, and yet we have never been attacked by a shark. So why would we have that fear? Well, we have that fear, again, because it makes sort of an evolutionary sense. But then we don't actually have to experience anything bad ourselves. All we have to do is be aware of the possibility. So watching Jaws, for example, and seeing somebody get shredded by a shark is enough. And so if you're trying to understand where somebody gets a fear of buttons, for example, or a fear of reflections or a fear of grass, it may be that they had a bad experience with those at some point, but it may be that there was no bad experience at all. And this is just something that came up organically over time. And one of the things that we think happens when a person is moving into a phobia is that they start engaging in a pattern of avoidance. And the problem that we run into with avoidance, at least avoidance of things that aren't really going to hurt you, is that it starts to magnify the scary value of the thing that you're avoiding. So if I start with a fear of dogs, and then I say, well, I'm just going to go out of my way to make sure I never see a dog again, and I don't even want to see them on television, and I'm just going to completely eliminate dogs from my life, I think we could predict fairly accurately that I'm never going to get over my fear of dogs. And in fact, my fear of dogs is probably going to become more intense. So the avoidance would be the first thing that I would look for. And it may be as simple as that. Maybe, if you're afraid of buttons, maybe it's not because anything horrible happened to you. It's just because at least at some point it gave you a funny feeling and you responded to that funny feeling with avoidance. And through your avoidance, the fear or the disgust magnified.
You said that these phobias are not that common. Are there any others that have been uncommon that you've worked with?
I had a person who was afraid of tailpipes on cars. I've had a patient that was afraid of coffee. I've had patients that were afraid of baseball. But again, these don't happen a lot. I think the idea is almost anything can be the target of a phobia, but it's probably nothing inherent to that, the features of that thing. It probably is just you felt bad, you started avoiding, next thing you know, this it spiraled out of control and became a mess.
How often do you see phobias of any severity kind of go away on their own as the decades pass? Or do you often see that really severe phobias have staying power?
I think the really severe phobias have staying power. And I think the reason for that is because once avoidance sets in, it's really hard to break out of that pattern. So if you become avoidant, all that really does is magnify the fear and keep you stuck. I think every day, day in, day out fears, especially in young people, especially in kids, they come and go, and you don't necessarily need to do anything about them. But if you are severely fearful and avoidant, I think it's probably a safe bet that that's not going to go away on its own.
That was Dr. David Tolin. We'll hear more from him later as he shares advice for anyone living with an uncommon fear. Now meet Bettina Hunt. She's lived with a deep, persistent fear of grass since she was young. And it doesn't matter if it's a neatly manicured lawn or a wild, overgrown field, any patch of grass can trigger an overwhelming sense of discomfort for her. Playgrounds, parks, fields, the kinds of places many of us associate with joy and relaxation, have always felt tense and treacherous to Bettina. I asked her to take me back to the beginning. When did she first realize that her experience with grass wasn't like everybody else's?
Going to a park and having my shoes taken off and my socks because that's what everybody does, and feeling that I don't really like that feeling, and looking beneath it and wondering what's underneath this grass.
Did you ever actually try to look?
Well, usually you can see it's mud, and I don't really like the mud, so it's the whole combination of the two.
Now, when you would be on this grass, presumably with other people, I'm sure you would watch them and you would see that they seemingly had no issue with the grass, and you're looking at yourself having an issue with the grass.
Yeah.
What did you make out of, and I guess what do you make out of, like, what's the difference between us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't even think about the difference, but I kind of cringe inside. I have that feeling of, oh God, why that? Oh, doesn't that feel a bit odd? That feeling, or why don't they care? I have that same feeling even with my own children, but I have to hold back and not allow my fears to be embedded into them.
What does it feel like when you imagine, and I'm sorry to put you in this position because it can't feel good, and I appreciate you going there with me, but when you imagine being barefoot on the grass, talk me through those feelings.
Well, even now as I'm sat here, my hands are feeling a bit cold and sort of clammy and sweaty, and I can feel my heart's racing a bit, just the mere thought of having to walk on that grass. I'm struggling with that feeling. I couldn't really describe exactly what that feeling is. I just know that it's agitated me and it's bothering me to think about the thought of having to walk on that grass.
Thank you. Is there any kind of grass that's maybe more offensive to you than other kinds of grass, or is it grass across the board?
No. If it's a really short grass and I can't see the mud underneath, that's more acceptable to me. I kind of feel that I could perhaps cope if forced to go on it, then I would be okay. I'd rather I was wearing shoes, and preferably Wellington boots up to my knee. That'd be really handy. But if I had to, then I wouldn't be so offended by walking on that grass. But if it's sort of like wild grass and I can see, and it's perhaps the weather's not great, so a lot of the mud is showing through as well, I really wouldn't like that.
So you mentioned boots. If you were wearing boots up to your chest and they've got padding, they've got lining, they've got 8 layers of rubber on them, and you had to walk across a field of grass, what would that be like for you?
I would still be apprehensive about walking through it. and even more so worrying about how I'm going to clean those muddy boots afterwards. So it's the combination of the two things together, because what does grass have? Grass has mud underneath. So I'd rather not like go on either of those things. I don't think I've actually ever felt my feet on, I'm not aware anymore now of ever having felt just plain grass on bare feet. I don't think I've ever done that. And I'm 48 this year.
So it sounds like, in a way, the real foulness is the mud, and it's the grass that's maybe obscuring it or trying to trick you into thinking the mud's not there. Or is it the mud?
It's everything to do with the mud, the grass. It's all just connected. And the maybe worms coming through there, creepy crawlies crawling onto me. I don't want to, or ants or anything like that. It's the whole thing, really. But yeah, the grass is like the precipitator for everything else that goes on with it, and I don't want to get near it because it will force me into having to deal with the mud and if there are any creepy crawlies in there.
So ever since you can remember, you've had this aversion to grass and the mud and creepy crawlies that may be underneath. How would you say your life is different than anybody else's in the interest of staying away from grass?
I don't really like picnics and putting blankets down, so there will be no romantic picnics with anybody.
There are other ways to woo you.
Yeah, well, clearly there is, because I've been married like nearly like 20 years now. So I must have done something right, apart from the no picnics, no lying on the grass on the back, chewing hay or anything like that. That won't happen. No walks in the park. As a mother of 2 children, I avoid grassy parks as much as I can, which obviously can impact on my children. What do mums do? They like to, it's the summer, the sun's out, let's go for a picnic. I avoid that. If I have to, I would probably have a chair to sit on. But even that is not infallible, because the last time I did that, I had a hairy caterpillar walking up my leg. Taking the long way round to places, so anticipating, like, is there a pathway? Is there a concrete path that I can take rather than having to walk across the grass? So it'll take me longer to get to places. My husband will just sort of walk across the green, because I live opposite a green.
Oh, of course.
Big, beautiful green, it's gorgeous. And he'll just say, well, we'll just walk across that. I say, oh, no, I won't. I'll be taking the long way, all the way on the path. And so, yeah, my kids are used to me sort of like having to leave places earlier to get to the place that we need to be on time, because I'm avoiding walking on the grass.
When people notice your discomfort or you tell them about your aversion to grass, what kind of reactions do you get?
To be honest with you, I don't really tell people, because I would rather just avoid the situation by maybe making up a excuse as to why I can't go somewhere, or I'll be on the periphery so that you probably wouldn't notice. So I might sort of like pretend to go onto the grass and then step back, go, oh, this place is nice over here. We'll stay here. And on the rare occasion when I have been forced to go onto the grass, I will be very silent and sort of holding my hands and clenching them together and sort of like praying that I'm going to be okay there, like to get through it. And I sort of have to push through it, because it is a very strange thing, isn't it? Who doesn't like grass? So like I will sort of walk on it, and then it will be hell. But I have to sort of sometimes push through, as we all do with certain things.
If you could wave a magic wand and have this phobia go away, would you?
Yeah, I think so, because then I wouldn't seem so odd. I mean, you were asking me, how do people react to it? And I remember a journalist speaking to me, and when she was so surprised that I had this, she was like, oh. And it never occurred to me to think that it was odd. That's the funny thing. I think when you have these things, you just live with them day to day. You never think about what the other people will think about what you're going through. And so, yeah, I'd like to be like everybody else and walk carefree, barefoot on the grass. Now, obviously, I'm almost like half a century old. And so I don't know what that's going to feel like, and I don't feel like I need to overcome it. But perhaps, the whole old romantic notion of everything that we see in the films of walking with your trousers rolled up across this grass carefree and lying on your back with the grass around you is quite romantic, isn't it?
Depends who you ask. But yeah.
And because I'm a romance author, I kind of think I have to like put myself there. I might not like to do this, but my character's going to like to do it.
You mentioned talking about this with other people and you didn't realize that it was uncommon or surprising to people because it's just been the way you are, just the way you experience the world. When you got an interview request from us to talk about this, what was your reaction?
I was quite surprised actually, and then I thought, oh my goodness, I must be really odd.
Oh,
Or as my husband would say, you're special.
special. One of a kind. Maybe you're probably not even one of a kind. Have you met people like you who have the same aversion?
No, I've never actually met anybody who's had an aversion to grass.
So what made you say yes to this conversation?
I think it was out of intrigue, really, and for somebody to be interested in like a fear that I had and a phobia. And I also think that sometimes if we talk about our more unusual phobias, it might normalize it for other people. Think of yourself as unique, you're special, and you aren't the only person. I might never have met somebody, but I bet someone listening today will identify with it or think, oh yeah, I've got a strange phobia or fear. And I'm going to talk about it now as well. I think the more that we talk about these things, the more we do normalize it, because we all have little things that make us who we are. And I'm not embarrassed about what I have, but it's just never come up for me to mention it to people. It's just never occurred to me to mention it. But then in fact, I mean, this whole thing came out because I did a tweet about a short story. Being an author, I took part in Twitter short stories, 100-word story, and I wrote about this phobia, and a journalist picked up on it, and then yourselves have picked up on that, and that's why I'm talking about it. And it was just from a sort of a flippant short story that I thought, well, to put online, and that's how this all came about.
Dare I say you were planting seeds?
Maybe.
In the mud.
Yeah. Hoping that it will grow, yeah.
Yeah, but not into grass.
Not into grass, no.
Well, Bettina Hunt, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You've been lovely.
After the break, when my next guest shaves his face in front of a mirror, what helps him cope with his fear of reflections?
It helps if I'm with someone, and even more so if they're in the mirror with or in the reflective surface with me, It's like, all right, I'm not alone. If something jumps out, it's 2-on-1. What are we going to do?
And when somebody comes in for a hug, what's a man with a button phobia feeling?
Depends how much buttons you have. Like if it's a trench coat, that's awful. But if a polo shirt, like, okay, fine, just, yeah.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Today we're exploring uncommon phobias and aversions, fears of everyday things that most people wouldn't even consider to be feared. But for the people who live with them, these feelings are real, persistent, and quietly shape their everyday lives. While researching this show, we learned that while not every one of these fears is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, some people can have a fear of numbers, trees, string. And did you know that there's such a thing as fear of phobias? It's called, of course, phobophobia. Later, you'll meet somebody whose fear of buttons not only shapes what he wears, but also deepens his empathy for others who have uncommon fears. But first, meet Marcos, who agreed to this interview if we only publicly use his first name to protect his identity. He has a profound fear of reflections, especially his own. It's not just discomfort, it's the unsettling idea that the reflection in the mirror might not behave the way it's supposed to. I asked Marcos, when did he first notice this fear creeping in? And what's it like to live in a world full of mirrors, screens, and reflections you can't always avoid?
Most of the mirrors are in bathrooms, and I'm always scared that I'm going to brush my teeth or something, and I'm going to see the curtain open in the mirror, and I turn back, and it's still there, like regular. And like my facial expression will change in the mirror when mine hasn't, or it will blink at different intervals. And it makes me feel watched in a way, Weird. I don't have it with anything else. I don't have like a phobia of being watched by, anything else. People, satellites, nothing, but just mirrors it is.
So it sounds almost like a horror movie thing. Yeah.
I think it started when I was like really little. We watched The Grudge, I think it was. My grandpa was into horror movies. I watched it. Something happened in the mirror and it happened to him in real life. And I was like, all right. And then I just kept noticing on as time went on. And I was like, all right, hate it.
Now, you were saying that this commonly happens in the bathroom. If you are driving in your car and you flip down the vanity mirror, how is that similar or different?
I don't flip it down. The one that, looks like the rear view mirror, I always make sure I turn it like a little more away from me so I don't look at myself eye to eye.
What about reflections from things like when your phone hasn't turned on yet and you can see that black mirror of your phone? What about things like that?
I try to turn it on as fast as I can, that's for sure.
What about reflections in windows, for example?
I don't know. I usually have curtains over everything just because I have a lot of windows here. So I don't really get a lot of reflection off the windows here, but it's never been that much of a problem.
Has your relationship with mirrors or reflections changed over time? Has it gotten worse? Or has it sort of stayed the same? How do you articulate that?
It kind of resurfaces every now and again, like worse when I have a nightmare about mirrors. I remember one recently where I was in the bathroom and my mirror fell down and like something started crawling out of the toilet in the mirror, and it wasn't in the actual toilet, and I was like, all right, I'm out, and I ran out of my house, and that's when I woke up and I was like, I'm not going back to bed. I'm just gonna get ready.
It's funny, before you and I connected, I was thinking about how I am surrounded by mirrors. I'm surrounded by reflections. And before hearing about what you're going through, I never thought about it at all. And once I started noticing just how many reflections they are, everything from, of course, a bathroom mirror to the reflection of my face in a car window to even just the reflection of anything in a spoon. You know what I mean? Like reflections are everywhere. So how do you manage your life?
A lot of it just mostly like most of the issues come from like I said, the bathroom. Like when I brush my teeth, I'll step away from the mirror. I'll go to like that little corner we have that all mirrors don't face, and I just do it there and only go there to, use the sink. And then when I shave, I try to keep it real fast and get it as done and carefully as I can, as swiftly. And my hair is always a mess. So if it's ever too much, I'll just throw a hoodie on and just cover up the rest of it. I'm not going to sit there and style it.
Some people describe mirrors as portals, illusions, even like other versions of themselves. Do any of those ideas, those sort of supernatural ideas, resonate with you?
Sometimes I get that creeping feeling that my reflection is going to grab me and take me somewhere else in like some mirror world in a way. It's like, I kind of like it. I'm vibing here a little bit, I don't want to be taken to a mirror dimension or anything like that.
Who do you tell about this?
Just a couple of people. My girlfriend, my parents recently too, and some coworkers at work. And they were like surprised and making fun of me, but I don't let it get to me. I was like, hey, we all got fears. Some of them may be irrational. And I'm not ashamed to admit it, just a thing.
What would you say is the most common reaction?
Like, really? Why? And it's like, I don't know. I could list you 100 reasons why. None of them are reasonable. You won't get them. I just, tell them like, hey, I've just seen too many horror movies. I don't want to see something in the mirror that doesn't happen over here. And ain't gonna happen. If I see myself do a different facial expression, I'm leaving. And then they're like, yeah, I get it. So you don't want to see two different perspectives of the same reality. It's like, yeah, no, whatever happens here should happen in the reflection.
If there were a way for you to take a pill and this fear just dissolves, would you take that pill?
Probably. At my job, I have to be clean shaven all the time. So I have to shave once a week, and then once a week I have to sit there, give it a couple seconds, step away, go in a little more. It just extends the whole thing, makes it longer than it has to be.
When you're faced with this on a regular basis, do you have techniques to calm you down or sort of prepare you for that elevated sense of anxiety?
It helps if I'm with someone, and even more so if they're in the mirror with or in the reflective surface with me. It's like, all right, I'm not alone. If something jumps out, it's 2-on-1. What are we gonna do? Music also really helps, distracts me. I listen to the lyrics, the beats, all the instruments used, and by the time I decipher the song, I've been staring at the mirror for a long time. And then lastly, being on the phone with someone, keeping my mind busy, talking to them, conversating, whatever it is I'd be talking about. One thing that definitely does make it worse would be standing in the dark in front of a mirror. I hate the dim lighting that I could barely see myself, and I will get out of there or turn on a light as fast as humanly possible. Another thing that makes it really iffy is turning my back on a mirror. I feel like that's worse because I feel like if I turn away, my reflection isn't, and it's gonna be just looking at me wide open or something, like it can see me, but I can't see him. So
It's like it's a paranormal fear. Like nothing's actually happened before, right? Like you haven't actually seen something happen, but you saw it in that movie and something in your brain just clicked into it's possible.
yeah, I think it's just like I saw it in a movie when I was a kid. It scared me, and I just kept having nightmares and nightmares and just kept feeding itself into my fear. Even if it was only one time and nothing ever happened, it was just feeding it by the nightmares I kept having after that.
You said you haven't met anybody yet who has the same fear. If you did meet somebody who shared this particular kind of anxiety around mirrors, what would you want to say to them?
Honestly, on how they go through it, how they, make their lives a little easier with any day-to-day basis things, or how they got themselves to, be better with it, and probably the same old, how did it start, you know?
I know. Did you watch the same movie?
Did you watch the same movie? You scared too? We'll do it together.
Can we have some sort of class action lawsuit against who made that movie? Ooh, does this make you not want to watch scary movies? Because I am not a fan of scary movies. My mind cannot tell the difference between a real event and an imaginary event, so I stay away from scary movies. Does this make you not want to watch scary movies?
Depends on the movie. Like, if it's paranormal, I stay away from it. If you got, your murderer in a machete or some kind of weird weapon, and I'm game.
Because it's been so long that you've lived with this. In a way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in a way it sounds like it's become part of your identity. One of the many parts of you, certainly not everything. There's so much more to you than this. But it sounds like it's a part of you that you are committed to, even if it's inconvenient and misunderstood. Does that feel about right?
Yeah, because I mean, like at this point, I get into the habit of when I brush my teeth, I actually just do that in the shower now because I don't have any reflections in there. I leave my toothbrush in there and the toothpaste, and I clean everything. I brush my teeth there. That way, I don't have to do it in front of the mirror. And at this point, it's just like stuck in my brain. I don't think about it.
So you've aligned your life so you don't really have to deal with it unless you're out and about and it's mirrors that you have no control over.
Oh yeah, like I haven't gone to many bars, but when I have, they have that mirror behind the actual alcohol, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take a booth instead though. But at that point, it's just kind of like automatic. Like I don't think about, oh, I got to get away. It's just like, oh, look, different direction.
You said you live with your parents, your mom?
Actually, got my own place now.
So now that you're in your own place, you haven't put up any new mirrors, right? There's just one in your bathroom?
My girlfriend did put one up in the bedroom, and I can say I hated it for the longest time because we would go to bed, the lights would turn off. I could see the reflection of the chandelier, and I'm like, nope, don't like that. but she doesn't want to turn it around. So I just face my pillow and knock out as fast as I can.
Thank you for adding on to that. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else we missed, or just open floor? Anything you want to say before I let you go?
I mean, I could say the little camera of myself over here showing it back to me hasn't been fun at all.
Thanks for bearing it.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of your background to avoid looking at my reflection. Actually, that's another point too. I don't mean to take up too much time, but FaceTime and stuff like that, that always makes me feel weird too, because it's, essentially like a reflective surface.
Seeing a little thumbnail of your own face?
Yeah, especially it's a little awkward too because of the, delay with the connection and stuff. And I always find myself doing this thing where I'll glance up and then glance at me, and then, it'll be a little delayed. And I'll be like just doing it over and over again, like like I'm trying to
catch it.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Well, Marcos, thank you so much for talking with me and for trusting me with this conversation. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been nice.
After the break, when one man developed a fear of buttons, and then he found out that he wasn't the only one, what was that like?
It was cool to learn about the phobia, like years later. You're not alone.
Plus, Dr. Tolin on the fine line between acknowledging the aversion and becoming emotionally entangled in it.
You really don't want the person to identify with the problem. We want them to sort of realize that the problem is something outside of you that you can work on. It's not you.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. So far, we've met people living with a fear of grass and of reflections. Each of these phobias touches everyday life in ways that might not be obvious from the outside, until you hear their stories. Now it's time to meet Mark Cardia. He has phobia, a deep fear of buttons, the ones with holes or eyelets sewn onto shirts and coats. For Mark, it's not just a dislike, it's a powerful, visceral reaction. For most of his life, he's avoided wearing shirts that have buttons. I asked him what's his first memory of feeling that something as small and ordinary as a shirt button just wasn't right.
It was something formal, a new shirt that my mom was wanting me to try on, like, oh, this is more formal or something like that. But then I was like, whoa, no, this is not for me. I don't like this at all. I was disgusted, like I couldn't be there.
Now, I was careful to wear a hoodie today. I didn't want you to see any buttons on me. Does this happen every time you see buttons on a shirt in general, or is it only when it's close to you? TV, movies, pictures? Talk a little bit more about the context.
It has gotten much better for me. Like years ago, I was like horrified, but now I don't like them. When the person has buttons, I just don't like them. But I've grown to live more accustomed to it. But I'm still not 100%. I'm always like looking down a little bit to see them. Like it's something strange, but it has gotten better.
So if I saw you at a party and we're friends and I'm wearing a button-down shirt and I go to hug you, what would that be like for you?
Depends how much buttons you have. Like if it's a trench coat, that's awful. But the polo shirt, like, okay, fine, just, yeah.
Make it a quick hug.
Exactly.
Does the size of the buttons, because you mentioned a trench coat, and when I think of a trench coat, I think of big buttons. Does the size of the buttons...
The bigger they are, the worse it is. Yeah.
Does it matter where on the apparel it is, like on the collar or on the front versus like the buttons on the sleeve or cuff?
The worst is on front. And I remember as a child, I liked it worse when it was in the back. Like it was, so this guy, because they're on me, but I can't see them. I can't just look in the back. That was something awful. Now on the side and stuff doesn't do much. Just very strange for me. Like I don't like them on front. Why would you have on other parts?
I've said the word button a lot of times, and I haven't heard you say it a ton. Is even hearing the word button difficult?
If it wasn't my native language, it would have been worse.
What's your native language?
Portuguese.
So you would try to avoid saying it in Portuguese.
Yeah, botões.
Botões?
Even in English, not something like I like saying, but I say it, but not very much.
When you were younger, how did your family respond to your aversion?
Yeah, well, I wish they knew about the phobia. They just like, what is this? Like, I don't understand. Well, and I didn't understand. It was so weird. My relationship with my mother, like, she was so confused. Like, explain to me why, explain to me. And I was just, no, I don't know. I was a child. I didn't know. I thought it was something with me. I was just strange like that. And I couldn't explain it to her. Like, it was cool to learn about the phobia, like, years later, the internet, like, oh, I'm fear of buttons. I research on YouTube or something, and then appeared a video and like, whoa, so cool. Like, you're not alone. Suddenly you find a family or so, or some sort of a group of people that understand you. And it was very cool to finally talk to my mother and like, hey, this is a phobia.
Is there anything that people get wrong about this?
Those jean pants, they think I don't like those, but for some reason they just don't annoy me. Like, and buttons like computer and stuff, like the buttons technology, they think I am averse too, but no.
The buttons on the front of jeans don't bother you.
Yeah, no, for some reason. Yeah, I think that maybe it's their texture or something. Like, they don't have those four little things in the middle, which I don't like. And then they're more metallic, more metal-like, and I'm fine.
Have you ever wished you didn't have this phobia? Or are you so used to it now that it's sort of ingrained in your identity or something else?
Well, it's a bit of both. Like, I would like to, the range of clothing would be like a lot more, but thank God for zippers and
And hoodies?
yeah, oh, hoodies, yes, yes. But no, I'm more used to it. It's gotten much better, so like I don't know if one day I could wear it, but yeah.
If you were contacted by the world's best anxiety therapist and were offered a free treatment series to help you begin to wear clothes with buttons on them, would you take them up on it?
I think I would. Like an exposure wins most phobias. I hear like people with arachnophobia, like they cure it with a spider near them for 5 seconds, then 10 seconds, increasing the exposure. And I think that if I would have to wear a shirt that has buttons for a long time, I would eventually just have to be more comfortable with it.
I know. I think about the idea that what if you were offered your dream job, and whatever your dream job was, it included mandatory button-down shirts? Like, what would you do?
That has happened a bit like when I was a child. I was going into, it's called Kidzania. It's like a city for kids that they can just have jobs, and we have like a type of money and we go buying stuff. And I was like, okay, I was going to the McDonald's thing of the place. I want to be. But then I saw those people with the uniform buttons. I was just like, no, I don't want to go. No, no. And it wasn't even like, oh, I'm annoyed that I'm not gonna go to the job. Like, no, I don't want to have the thought of having those. Like I said, I was a child. It wasn't even worse. So yeah.
By talking with you, I can tell that you are kind,
No, thank you.
and you seem like someone who is curious about himself and the world around him. Like, there's a softness to you and a compassionate nature to you that's really obvious to me. And I wonder, when you think about this phobia, if you think it plays any role in that compassionate part of you. You know, if you didn't have this phobia about buttons, do you think maybe you wouldn't be so mindful about other people? Or am I just projecting?
No, yes, that's a component. I think it happens with most people. Like, when you have an experience to connect with other people, like woman, like gay, saying lesbian, like you have an experience, have a connection. The more you don't have that connection, the more you don't care much about those people. The other people can otherize those people, like, and then, yeah, when the producer said like, oh, we're gonna have a person that has a phobia on grass or like a mirror, I was like, that's so weird. Why would and then no, they would think the same thing as me. So like, okay, I'm fine. I actually want to hear those people. Like, that'd be nice. Yeah.
And they also share a certain sort of, like, they get it. They get that this is uncommon and that this is just the way that life has gone for them. It's sort of a freeing thing to just be like, yeah, this is how I am. I'm not going to apologize. I can't apologize. It's not something to apologize for. It's just the way I am. So here we go. You know, the world is weird enough.
Yeah. We're all weird in some ways.
I know.
It's just something you have, something unique that you have that creates a different life. Everyone has different experiences in life, and that's just part of your experience.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for talking with me.
It was really good to have conversation. I really liked it. I'm normally a person a little more shy, but here I'm relaxed. It was a good experience. I really liked it.
Before we go, let's return to Dr. David Tolin. He's the director of the Anxiety Disorders Center at the Institute of Living in Hartford. He's spent decades helping people understand and treat anxiety and phobias of all kinds. For our guests who have found a way to live with this, but they still are interested in maybe facing these phobias, what kind of therapy might work best? Of course, we all know about cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy. Which one do you think maybe would be a good place for them to start?
The name of the game is exposure therapy, and this can be done on your own, and it can also be done with the help of a professional therapist. But the basic idea is that we're going to replace avoidance with approach. So if avoidance is the problem, then the solution is to approach those things. And you don't have to do it all at once, and you're not looking to torture yourself, but you are looking to get outside your comfort zone just a little bit so that it expands. And then you get outside your comfort zone a little bit more, and your comfort zone expands more and more and more and more, which means we might start with something very small. It might be, for example, just saying the word button and just get used to the word, maybe writing it down. Then maybe we start looking at pictures of buttons or even cartoons of buttons, drawings. We might start looking at actual buttons, but they're far away, and then we bring them a little closer. Then we might start touching them. And it's just one step at a time, pacing it according to the client's response so that eventually they learn they don't have to avoid these things and that nothing terrible is going to happen to them.
Because some of the people on this show did begin harboring these fears at a really young age, I think about their parents who didn't understand and maybe thought it was a passing thing. For parents who are seeing maybe even common phobias in their children come and go, but they're not sure whether or not, like, how do I know when this one is not going? Or what can I do to make sure that I help this child know the reality of the situation so that the phobia doesn't stick? What kind of advice do you have for those parents?
Oh, great questions. And I think there's a lot that parents can do in a situation like that. One is check your own anxiety. Model fearlessness as the parent, because if you model fearful behavior, if you the parent can't stand being near a dog, then how do you expect that your child is going to learn anything other than that? So model fearless behavior, but I also think watch out for excessive accommodation of the fear. Sometimes parents feel like they have to bend over backward to make sure that their kid doesn't get upset, and that often does more harm than good. Sometimes it's helpful, not necessarily that we want to make the kid feel awful, but sometimes it is helpful to allow the child to experience some uncomfortable feelings once in a while and to learn that those feelings are okay. Nothing terrible happens just because you're upset. And it doesn't mean that you have to run screaming for the hills. Sometimes you can lean into that fear and things work out better.
I wonder to what degree, for anybody who has any kind of phobia, let alone a less common one, that it becomes almost like part of your identity, especially once you're open about it. Like if you're the guy who's afraid of your reflection, all of a sudden it sort of reinforces, yeah, I'm the guy who's afraid of his reflection.
And that's an uphill battle for us, when we start seeing somebody like that in therapy, because you really don't want the person to identify with the problem. We want them to sort of realize that the problem is something outside of you that you can work on. It's not you, and this is not necessarily who you are. So helping the person understand the distinction between themselves and their fear is often a critical challenge.
And they are so much more.
Of course, we see this all the time. We see patients who their first thing that they say about themselves is I have OCD, or I have PTSD, or I have social phobia, or whatever it is that they're struggling with. And while that is true that you have this, I mean, like you said, there's so much more to them than that.
I know that the people I interviewed are listening to this episode to hear how it came out and to hear the other people who joined them. What can you say to reassure them either that they're going to be okay, or that treatment could work, or I don't know, any sort of reaction you'd like them to hear from you?
Sure, I'll give you just a simple yes/no kind of flow chart. So my first question is this fear making you miserable and or impairing your ability to function? If the answer is no, then peace be with you. You're fine. This is not going to be a big issue. You do you. On the other hand, if the answer is yes to either of those, this is really causing a problem for me in my life, then understand you have options, and you can do it yourself or you can do it with a counselor. But the idea basically is start to approach those things that you've been avoiding. Start to come progressively closer and closer to the stuff that you don't want to do until your brain starts to adjust and realizes that nothing terrible is happening to you.
For those who are friends or family community with somebody who has a phobia that they do not understand, we do not get it. How does this happen? How do we most lovingly, usefully interact with people when we don't understand or share their phobia?
Recognize this is their journey, not yours, and that they are the ones who get to make the call as to whether they're going to do something about this. It's very easy to get impatient with a loved one and go, why don't you just do something about this? But that in the history of mental health never worked. And so I think that you have to be patient and recognize that some people are going to be ready to work on their fears and some people are not. And that's just the way it is. But if your loved one is ready to work on their fear, just understand there are good, solid, evidence-based ways to do that.
Well, Dr. David Tolin, thank you so much for talking with me.
My pleasure, Kyone, anytime.
Audacious is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin DeMartinez, Meg Fitzgerald, and Robin Doyon-Aitken at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. If you want to hear more from Dr. David Tolin, we'll link to our earlier episode about hoarding at ctpublic.org/audacious. While you're there, you'll find related episodes, like one on the psychology behind many common superstitions. And if you're curious about a more common fear, check out the episode we did about snakes and the people who are really into them. You'll meet one man who set a world record by dangling 13 live rattlesnakes from his mouth, and another who, in the name of science, injected himself with snake venom for nearly 20 years, trying to create the world's first fully human broad-spectrum antivenom. You can find all of those conversations and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace.